I had exactly 12 days left before my lease was up. I knew it down to the hour, the minute even, because every time I looked at my calendar app or checked the notification from my landlord, that date stared back at me like a clock ticking louder with each passing day. After 5 years in this little Los Angeles apartment, the only place that ever truly felt like mine, I was about to be out on the street. My name is Claire Dawson, and if you've ever lived paycheck to paycheck, juggling bills like a circus act, then you already know how fragile life can feel. I was working 2 part-time jobs, freelance graphic design during the day and waiting tables at night. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat. That is, until the cost of everything started climbing, my freelance clients pulled back, and the restaurant cut hours. I was drowning, and the rent was the anchor. The eviction notice wasn't unexpected. I was 2 months behind and I'd already used up every favor I could ask. My roommate had moved out 6 months ago, and no one wanted to split rent on an aging 1-bedroom near the outskirts of Silver Lake. I didn't blame them. The plumbing creaked, the heating was unpredictable, and the neighbors above were a couple who had loud fights and louder makeups. Still, it was my place. And I loved it. So when Mr. Henley, my landlord, called and asked if I could come by his office to discuss options, I assumed it was just a final warning before the inevitable. Mr. Henley was in his mid-50s, always dressed like he was on his way to court even though he just managed 3 buildings. He was polite, quiet, and the type of guy who carried a clipboard like it was an extension of his body. I didn't know much about him, other than the fact that he lived alone and was meticulous with rent collection. I showed up that Friday with my heart pounding, my hands slightly clammy. The small building office smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. He greeted me with a nod, gestured toward the chair across from his desk, and sat down with a sigh. "Claire," he began, glancing at a file in front of him, "I'm going to be honest with you. I've seen tenants come and go over 20 years. Some disappear in the middle of the night, others beg for extensions, and a few, very few, show up, like you did, to talk." I swallowed hard. "I want to make this right. I really do." He nodded. "I believe you. Which is why I'm going to offer you something I don't usually offer." I leaned in slightly, uncertain but hopeful. "Okay. There's another way you can stay," he said slowly, folding his hands. "But I need to explain first." That phrase, "another way you can stay," rattled around in my mind like a loose coin. Was he about to offer me some kind of illegal sublet agreement? Some property management loophole? I didn't know what to expect. "I own another property. Not an apartment," he clarified. "It's a small cabin up near Lake Arrowhead. Quiet, secluded. Needs work. It's been vacant for over a year. I need someone to stay there for a few months. Fix it up a bit. Keep an eye on things. In exchange, I'll forgive the back rent and pause any collection actions." My first thought, this sounds too good to be true. My second, is there a catch? "What kind of work are we talking about?" I asked. He shrugged. "Light stuff. Painting, cleaning, maybe some yard work. I'd cover supplies. And I'd give you a small monthly stipend. Not much, but enough to get by while you're there." I blinked. "You'd forgive the rent?" "If you stay for 3 months, he said, leaning back in his chair. "No skipping out early. I'll draw up an agreement. If you leave before the 3 months, the rent debt returns and we proceed with eviction." I was stunned. This wasn't a handout. It was an odd job wrapped in a second chance. I asked for a night to think about it, and he agreed. I barely slept, weighed every possible outcome, and ultimately texted him the next morning, "I'll do it." 2 days later, I was packing everything I owned into my car. I left behind the city, the traffic, the streetlights, and drove into the mountains. The drive to Lake Arrowhead took just over 2 hours. When I arrived, the air was crisp and pine-scented, the sky wider than I remembered it ever being in the city. The cabin was perched at the end of a narrow gravel road, surrounded by trees that creaked when the wind moved through them. The place looked like something out of a faded postcard. Weather-worn wood, a sagging porch, and a roof dotted with pine needles. It was peaceful, eerie even, but strangely beautiful. Inside, it was dusty but not damaged. The furniture was old-fashioned, plaid couches, lace curtains, a brick fireplace, and everything smelled like cedar and age. Mr. Henley left me a list of tasks on the kitchen table and a prepaid phone for emergencies. He told me he wouldn't be reachable often because he'd be traveling for family matters. That struck me as odd, but I didn't press. I was alone in the woods with 3 months to prove I was worth giving a second chance. The first week went by quietly. I cleaned, I scrubbed, I painted the living room walls a soft cream. I even found myself sketching again, sitting out on the porch during sunsets with my old sketchpad balanced on my knee. There was no cell service, no internet, and the silence wrapped around me like a warm quilt. But then strange things started happening. On the 9th night, I heard footsteps outside the cabin around midnight. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer, but the steps were deliberate. Human. I peeked through the window but saw nothing. The next morning, I found faint boot prints near the porch. I told myself it was a hiker who got lost. Nothing more. But it didn't stop. The 12th night, I woke up to the sound of the back door creaking open. I was sure I had locked it. I crept out of bed, heart pounding, and found the door ajar. Nothing appeared to be missing. Just open. I started sleeping with a flashlight beside me, and a heavy wrench under my pillow. The list of repairs kept me busy, but paranoia was growing like a vine inside me. I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. One afternoon, I was clearing out the shed when I found a stack of old newspapers and journals. They belonged to a woman named Helen Winters. From what I could gather, she had lived in the cabin sometime in the 90s. Her journal entries were scattered, mostly about gardening and weather until they weren't. One page read, "I hear him again at night. The one who whistles. He walks the perimeter but never comes to the door. I think he's waiting for something." Another, "I locked the doors. Still, the footprints return." I shivered. I wasn't a superstitious person, but the parallels unsettled me. I considered calling Mr. Henley but remembered he said he'd be unreachable for a while. So I pushed through the fear. I stayed. More nights passed. I kept working, kept sketching, kept pretending everything was fine. Then, on the 24th night, I woke to the sound of someone humming just outside my bedroom window. A low, tuneless hum. I froze, clutching the wrench, waiting for it to stop. When it finally did, I peeked through the curtain. No one. But the next morning, nailed to the front door, was a single piece of paper. 3 words. "You should leave."